Welcome to Practical Talk Time. I'm Sandy Wrobel, your host for the show, and we have Lisa Paul Streitfeld with us again, and we're going to be talking about science, astrology, and philosophy, and how they're interconnected with each other. Welcome back to the show,
Thank
Lisa.
you.
And we probably could do 100 shows with your background.
That's good to know. Yeah.
While we had talked a little bit before opening the show, you said that you had done several experiments trying to look at science and astrology and philosophy. Would you like to give us some examples?
Okay, I mean, basically it's based on Jung's concept of synchronicity. That's a term he utilized for magic, you call it meaningful moments in time. And this is related to, and this is actually a concept now in continental philosophy, of the kairos moment, this kairos leap, when you're going from the linear time to cyclical time. Mm-hmm. And, you know, like time goes like this, A to B to C to D, and that's, you know, what we consider patriarchy, the linear time. Or you go into this idea of where it's going and they merge, you know, and it's like a moment outside of time and space where you make this leap, the paradigm shift. Mm-hmm. So I was doing a series of experiments in the avant-garde in New York with timed actions, you could call them, timed performances with the cosmology, with the planets, with astrology, I could say. And you know, just seeing what resulted from that, even making hypothesis as in a scientific experiment, making hypothesis and seeing what comes out of it. But basically, going back to what I mentioned before about the Heisenberg principle, the idea, I mean, it stemmed from this idea, if you're a critic and you're on, you know, I know as a metaphysician that we're on the cusp of something new. I mean, so the age of Aquarius, okay? We're in a paradigm shift. Even if you don't believe in astrology, there's a general consensus of a paradigm shift.
Right, people can just look at their technology, and even young people today are complaining they can't keep up with all the technological changes.
Which is so much a part of it, okay? So, but not the only aspect, technology.
Right. But
I mean,
as an
really,
example.
you know, and again, it's the imbalance where we're ruled by technology. But how can, and that, so this is what I was embarked on, a series of experiments, and they were personally motivated. One of them was, you know, this fear of being published. And I conquered that fear by doing a 5-chapter, year-long performance at the Lab Gallery in New York. That was in the Roger Smith Hotel, which actually the owner of the Roger Smith Hotel lives in Bethel. Well, no,
really?
In Stamford, I should say.
Uh-huh.
So that's a Connecticut connection here. So we had this gallery for a while, a storefront gallery. So I did very alchemical, the whole theme was alchemical, to go through the alchemical processes and to get to this new archetype, you know,
now,
which
what
is
does
the
alchemical
quintessential
mean?
element. Alchemy is an ancient art that was practiced underground. It was considered heretical by the Catholic Church, so it had to be practiced in secret. And Jung resurrected it in the 20th century because he needed some kind of foundation of thinking for his work in the unconscious. He was deeply immersed in the unconscious after his break with Freud, and of course that came up with a new psychology, archetypal psychology, that he invented. And the very term archetype, which is the idea of these constellations of energy, which as astrologers we know that has to do with configurations that appear. We just had one, the cardinal cross,
right,
under the eclipse.
Right.
Wow, major catastrophe for many people. Also major breakthrough. You could see that was another gateway to the age of Aquarius. Maybe we could say that the archetype was actually manifested, you know, during this last one.
But some people think it won't show up till July or June or July.
Well,
other effects of
Leo,
the Grand Cross, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. There's a Grand Cross now?
No, the ramifications of it.
No,
Yeah.
we had a cardinal cross. I didn't know if
Cardinal.
you're saying, okay, there was another one.
Well, it can be called a grand cross or looking at the oppositions or the squares. Yeah.
I don't know why I was thinking, I'm thinking of the fixed cross because of Leo, but I didn't think that there was one. But there was a fixed cross, in 1999, and it was over the Cornwall, the whole Knights of the Holy Grail. I mean, this whole area in England that's reverberates with the Knights and the Templars and King Arthur and this whole thing. And so, that's what I mean, these configurations. So the configuration I was working with was January 23rd, 1997, which was a 6-pointed star, a seal of Solomon in the sky. It was on my birthday. And that was really seen as a doorway to the age of Aquarius. And that's really what started my journey as a journalist and also as, I don't know what you say, doing these experiments. So I did experiments that every year on the 23rd, just doing some kind of ritual or performance that would pull up that configuration.
The 23rd of what month?
January.
January, okay.
Yeah, because it was in Aquarius, but Jupiter was also in Aquarius, and Neptune. I mean, it was a lineup in Aquarius, but it was also in a seal of Solomon, and the seal of Solomon is the configuration. Well, that was a dispute between Wolfgang Pauli and who's won a Nobel Prize for science. He's the father. You could say he's the father of 20th century science, and then Jung, who was the prophet. They were both prophets for the 21st century. What's not known is that they had a 30-year correspondence, and they were trying to bring astrology and science back together. Not astrology, I'm sorry.
Astronomy?
Bringing back psychology. Well, we know now that Jung was into astrology, and again, he didn't want anybody to know that.
It's funny because when I was in college, I was taking psychology courses in graduate, and I remember saying, gee, it almost seems like, there was something I read and I said, gee, it almost seems like something you'd see in a horoscope in the newspaper.
Yeah.
And the professor agreed with me.
Yeah.
But unbeknownst to any of this.
Well, yeah, because what he did is start doing experiments because he when you're talking about
The
archetypes,
symptoms.
where do they come from? Then he started to understand they come from these configurations. So there was this configuration on January 23rd. And what happened, just again synchronistically, I found in a book of letters between Wolfgang Pauli and Carl Jung, where they both agreed that the Eros Gamos, which is the 6-pointed star, was the
That's the same as the Star of
icon
David?
for the age of Aquarius, but they disagreed on the configuration. Jung thought it was the quaternity, which would be like the Trinity plus one, and Wolfgang Pauli thought it was the seal of Solomon, and there was a big dispute about that. But what happened with me is that I found this book, and at the end, in the index, Wolfgang Pauli had a dream on January 23rd, 1938. And it was about a woman who couldn't get published, a dark woman, and she was crying because she couldn't get published. And she was working with, as I was, with this idea of time and certain archetype energies being manifested in time. And she couldn't get published until this process was complete. She had to have the equality, like between, as it said in the dream, definite time and indefinite time. So I took that to be my credo, and I did a performance with a show I did in New York in 2006, and I wrote the dream on the window, and that sort of started me off on these experiments. And
what did you do for a performance?
Well, I wrote it on the window, and that was pretty much a performance.
I'm thinking
because
dance or music.
Because in the dream,
Yeah.
there was a window in the dream, so it was like manifesting something.
Okay.
And then that led to a performance, and I did end up probably crying in the gallery because I couldn't get published. I put all my rejection letters in the gallery during this alchemy. So there's 4 stages of alchemy, and then you get to the 5th stage, and that's the quintessential stage. The word quintessential means, the ultimate oneness, the unity. So that's what I did as an experiment, and just to see what would happen, if I conjured up this magic in this gallery.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot
It's
of
like
magic.
turning things into gold, or
That's exactly
yes.
it. But through spirit. So that's what I
Right.
say. So Jung revived alchemy, and then his interpretation was they weren't really trying to make, well, in a general sense, they weren't trying to make, lead into gold. It was really about their spirit. But it was couched in these terms of, people really, when you come down to, most people only understand the material. So they can understand trying to make lead into gold, but they
Right.
don't understand this idea of getting to a higher stage in terms of spirit. Yeah. So that's was Jung's contribution. So I sort of brought that into the avant-garde in New York, and that was experiment also on the Heisenberg principle. And then I took that because what I was starting to say before, if I'm reviewing art that's on the cutting edge, there's always this problem of barrier and distance, right? How do that's writing for a newspaper, and there's supposed to be this absolute barrier set up between myself and the art, but without going into it and becoming participant, how am I going to really understand it? So this was a huge obstacle for me, a huge dilemma of how to surmount that distance, even with artists, how do I really understand what an artist is doing without entering into their space, into their psyche in a sense. Well, that's what I made into my overall experiment. And then I wrote a paper on it and took it to the International Critics Congress, and it was called I don't know now what I called, about the Heisenberg art and the Heisenberg and the uncertainty principle. So the idea is the more consciousness I bring into what you call an experiment on the cutting edge of art, the more the further of the evolution of the artist and the audience. If there's just a person there that has the consciousness of what's happening and can take it back and inform the readers about it. And it was astrology that really gave me the means to do that.
So what was the
So that was my secret,
So what was the outcome of this little experiment that you did, or big experiment?
Well, I'm still,
You're still doing
happening, because I took that, I did the paper on it, and then actually it's still going on, because I then went to the Critics Congress this last year, 2013, and I applied it. And then we had James Elkins, who's this world-known, he's sort of the critic of the critics. He's written books on criticism and the state of criticism, and everybody agrees criticism is a terrible state. And I applied that principle to this interaction he was having with the critics. And I don't know, I feel like it worked. You can go, I write for Huffington Post, so I did a posting on it for Huffington Post. And I called it the resurrection of art criticism. Because actually there was a young German there that won a Young Critics Award that did this whole performance. It was unexpected, of death and rebirth. And that's a big part of what what I see in art, and what I'm trying to communicate is this idea of the cyclical time, going back to the death, rebirth.
Like a Pluto.
Yeah. But of course that's anti-Christian, because Christian is very much a linear. The liturgy in Christianity is very linear. That Christ was born, he was
Christ has died, he will rise again.
Yeah, well, that's the dichotomy.
It's
rising
Plutonian.
again sounds
Like Pluto.
Exactly, but it would seem rising again is cyclical, but it's not. It really is. That's sort of the shadow of
Well, they're supposed to have
Christianity.
had their own astrologers too, and a lot of it, I think, is based on power. What keeps many things of what they would call secret or occult is because people who study it know what they can do and how they can use it for good or for evil, but they don't want the masses or other people to know it. Like, knowledge is power.
Completely, of course.
So
The priests are supposed to have all the powers, so that's why alchemy was totally, considered heretical, because that's power, to take the energies, the elements, and transform them, transform yourself from them. No, that's not acceptable. It has to be, only the priest can do that. And even in ancient times, the priests at the, the Aztecs or, at the pyramids, they knew when the eclipses were, and that's how they controlled the people. Because the people would be the shock of experiencing this eclipse, but the priests knew when they were going to happen, so that's how they could.
And if I remember correctly, isn't it said that there was an eclipse when Christ died on the cross? The sky turned black. I kind of remember that story.
Well, that's, that sounds good as a mythology, even if it wasn't
I think
true.
it's what the nuns had told us. I don't know.
I
would never. Well, and then also
that would be interesting, bringing a mysticism in.
Well, also when Christ was born, when astrologers look at it, they give different birth dates and years, and some really say that it really would have been in the spring with the baby animals. And
well, that's very interesting, yeah. But you know how the Christianity based their holidays around the pagan.
Yes.
So that would be the return of the light, was the winter solstice, and that became Christmas.
Lori has a cabin. She's the official witch of Salem, and I read a book that she had written, and it was interesting in how she correlated the pagan religion, or the Wiccan, with Catholicism. I think she had been born Catholic, which I never knew. I didn't study the Wiccan, but it was really, really quite interesting, and that people were kind of tricked into it because they weren't literate. Maybe 15% of the people could read.
Right.
So that they just associated it with the holidays.
Right.
Yes, and that's when people really celebrate a lot of religion, is for the holidays and the family get-togethers.
Yes.
If you come right down to the core of it.
To appropriate the holidays, that was the way they did it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think with the age of Aquarius, it should be that I think the traditional standardized religion will become less influential and people will be more into the spiritual.
Right. I mean, for me, that's, I guess, the work I'm doing, is the essence of the work I'm doing is, well, again, it's the idea of a new archetype.
And freedom with Aquarius.
Yeah, the freedom is the new archetype, where the inner integration, that you no longer need to be searching outward. And, well, for me, really, it's been this process of inner and outer. That's how I pretty much summed it up in terms of philosophy. It's the Mobius strip, that's inside and outside at the same time.
And you can never really straighten it out.
Exactly. So where your inner process is reflected in your outer. So the ultimate place to be is where you're living a waking dream. I mean, everything inner is reflected outside of you, and you're living your own movie, basically. You're living your own movie where you're the writer, you're the director, you're the actor, you have all those roles.
Yeah.
And that's ultimate freedom. I mean, that's how it came through in my creative process. So.
Yeah, and I think the idea, the changes, even in families, there's a whole bunch of things, and we're just in the very early stages, the age of Aquarius. And it's funny because I often think, this will be thousands of years, but at the end of the age of Aquarius, then it would be the age of Capricorn coming in, I would think. And that would be like looking for authority, like a clamp down maybe on all the freedom.
I don't want to think that. Actually, we're going through some of that now, a lot of that now.
Yes.
With Pluto and Capricorn.
Well, which is here right now, yes.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I wouldn't want to see it that way. I want to see, that'll probably be about restoring the earth, I mean, how's the earth going to get through what it's going through now?
You're looking at it, it's an earth sign. And I'm thinking of authority, these are the rules.
No, but see, that's what we're getting rid of, is Capricorn being authority. We want to go back to we don't want, that's the tricky thing, we don't want to go back to the matriarchy. So think of the Capricorn as the matriarchy before the patriarchy, right? But we don't want that, we want the balance.
For the age of Aquarius,
yeah.
But I'm thinking thousands of years when we get into Capricorn.
Yeah, but I would like to see that as where we really honor the earth again, right? I mean,
that sounds good too. Well,
so it doesn't have to be where the whole patriarchy is let's exploit the earth, let's all these riches, let's exploit it. And I was talking with a friend the other day with fracking, coming up with this mythology I never considered. With fracking and what it's doing to the water system, or the underground water supply, it's like milking. I mean, it's like sucking the soul out of this, well, it's happening in the U.S., but out of the earth. Because
every last bit of fuel.
Yeah, exactly. We can't restrain, our energy needs. Instead, we're just sucking it dry. I mean, there's a mythology going on there with the really devastating effects of fracking. But
Which mythology do you think that is?
well, the sucking the feminine dry and not acknowledging the feminine. I mean, that's a lot of what I do.
Oh, like Mother
yeah.
Earth. Okay. That's the mother, the
Yeah, the mother is
female,
the earth.
Mother Earth,
and,
okay.
and sucking this gas out of her. All that gas and petroleum is the feminine process. It takes, it's a process that goes on within the earth of evolutionary process, and it's non-renewable. I mean, we have to honor and respect it. This idea. I mean, so this is what we reached our limits with this. But this is the idea of reaching the limits with the patriarchy. So so then we have the dangers of the age of Aquarius. Aquarius is a very complex sign, because
Right.
there's two rulers.
Uranus and
Capricorn.
Saturn.
Yeah.
So
So
which is interesting. Now that I'm
Yeah.
thinking, Uranus and then Capricorn would be the Saturn. Like
Yeah,
the Aquarius is both rulers.
yeah, and that's the male and female too. So right there you have the masculine, feminine. Uranus is the male, and the when Uranus for the viewers, that's the revolutionary planet. That's what equates
American
Aquarius
Revolution.
with genius.
Yeah.
And then you have the Capricorn is very much the traditional side of Aquarius, but that's again the genius. Genius doesn't come out of nowhere. I mean, genius is on the backs of the forebearers, So that's Capricorn, the tradition, but it's about innovating tradition. That would be the ideal marriage in
Right,
Aquarius.
yes.
So again, and then with the earth, it's about honoring the earth. And if this technology gone wild is destroying the earth, that's not at all a balanced situation.
We
So.
talked briefly about that before we started taping this show about with all the technology and the reliance upon it, and even with the schools taking away the time for creative efforts and everything being memorized,
Yeah.
losing balance. Something should be memorized, and that it'll stop the creativity and the thinking. If I were to only, even in our discussion, we're doing this, just speaking to each other. It's not necessarily agreeing or reflecting anything we've read. It's just thinking about what are the possibilities. We really don't know what's going to happen a couple of thousand years from now. We're just
No.
speculating upon what we know.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, but we do know what's going on right now, and today's paper said it's really dire what's going on with the global warming, so.
And also the
President's
condition of
report.
the world as far as the powers in China and Russia and the United States. I mean, there's so many things that can be talked about in the mundane world. One of our crew members, Rosemary Isaacson, worked for many years at the Danbury paper. She's retired, and she's also upset with even where the local papers have gone. People aren't interested in looking at the news. They're just interested in, what they get on the internet.
Yeah, well, that goes back to my journalism background. What's also going on in America is a major corporate control, and that's really reflected in the worst way in the newspapers, because when the corporate controls even local papers, as it's doing, and I witnessed and experienced that during when I was a newspaper critic, then there isn't the interest in the local, and then the consolidation, and so that's a big problem, a loss of community, and technology also affects that. Yeah, there's a lot of problems to deal with now. But it seemed like the warnings we got, maybe from the prophets, Nostradamus certainly, was that the age of Aquarius, the danger of technology. And of course that comes from the danger of the bomb, or they didn't even foresee, being controlled by our gadgets. Gadget love, we call it.
I was amazed because I remember several years ago people were talking about artificial intelligence with computers. And at the time I thought, well, that's a little far-fetched, but now we know it can actually exist. And there was just a program I heard maybe 3 or 4 nights ago, and it was about with this artificial intelligence that the robots could literally, like we would think as being fiction, could start thinking for themselves and even go against humans because they might fear that something would happen to them, that we could be literally at war with robots.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like reality is almost reaching what was fiction. It's harder to tell
incredible.
fact from fiction.
Yeah, it's incredible, like how much things have evolved forward, but at the same time taking us backward. So that's the challenge.
Do you think that
Huge
periodically we go into a dark age with all the new technology and everything? It seems if we become over-reliant on it and not thinking for ourselves, we could actually go into what have been the dark ages, where there was nothing being done to speak of.
Well,
I'm
but
wondering
this
if
is
there's
so
a
new.
cycle.
Yeah, but this is so new. I don't know if we could relate it to any previous cycle. Although, I don't know, they'd say...
There's the age of Aries, the age of Pisces, now it's
Yeah.
the age of Aquarius.
and
I'm sure before that.
What did they say? Atlantis was the last age of Aquarius? And then how did that... but I really think the problem is global warming and the destruction of the Earth.
Do you really believe
Yeah.
there's global warming?
Oh, completely. Completely. So...
You hear arguments on both sides. Some saying that climate is a long-term...
No. That's just denial. I mean, this is the patriarchy, and as the 1% and the power gets more consolidated, that it's just gotten so much worse.
Mm-hmm.
But I was in China. I was in China for 3 months, and if you have to really travel China, and you know the problem. I mean, they burn 80% coal there, and it's just the pollution is out. I mean, that's what sped it up.
Mm-hmm. I have friends
So-
that went on a 3-week cruise, but of course I think then you see what they want the tourists to see, but they have a niece that was working there.
Yeah, I mean, I just was on my own. They don't control you that much, and
Well, they
yeah.
went on a planned...
Yeah, I know. I mean, I guess that's the way it used to be, but no, I mean, you can't escape it. The situation.
And there's also the Chinese healing, and there's a lot of ancient things there.
Yeah.
And, I can't believe it, we're down to 30 seconds.
Really? Oh my
Really?
gosh. We
Okay.
only got started.
All right, anything you want to say just to close this section
30
up?
seconds. Well, I wish peace and health to everybody, and I just, what's within, go within, and we'll find it without.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much. It
Thank
was
you.
good having you back on. And to our viewers, thank you very much for listening. If you have questions or something you didn't understand, email us at practicaltalktime@yahoo.com, and we'd be glad to have Lisa or one of us respond back to you. Thank you.